I think everybody there was moved to tears, and I thought as I came out, I thought, I just wish there was something I could.
Not everything needed to be explained. And yet, in that moment, everything was understood. Camilla's place in the royal hierarchy was clear, but her place in Charlotte's heart remained uncertain. The event proceeded as expected: hymns, readings, nods to tradition. But the real story played out in the shadows, in stolen glances and quiet tension. Onlookers whispered afterward about how odd the energy had felt, how Camilla appeared distant, even withdrawn. Rumors began to bubble. Was there tension beneath the family's united front? Was Camilla's relationship with William's children more fractured than anyone had admitted? And why did Charlotte, usually so poised, seem hesitant that day? Charlotte didn't need words to understand. She had grown used to reading the room, measuring tone, noticing who was missing from group hugs, watching who leaned in and who stepped back. The Abbey service crystallized something she had been sensing for a while. This wasn't just about differences in age or background, it was about emotional distance. Camilla may have been queen by title, but her connection to Charlotte felt ceremonial at best, never personal, never maternal. Kate would later reflect on the day as tense, though she never used that word publicly. She handled it with the same grace she always did, steering her children through the occasion with warmth and patience. But Charlotte wasn't a toddler anymore. She was watching, listening, learning. And what she absorbed that day would soon collide with something even more revealing. But it wasn't just what Charlotte saw. It was what she accidentally overheard that changed everything. One hallway, one child, one truth that stunned the future king and queen. It wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't a conversation meant for small ears or any ears beyond the walls that had long protected the crown's secrets. But in a quiet corridor of the palace, where chandeliers hung over decades of royal history and the portraits of kings and queens stared down in silence, Charlotte heard something that would change everything. She hadn't gone looking for it. She was simply there, wandering with the innocent freedom only a child could possess, when she stumbled upon words that struck her like a thunderclap. What she heard wasn't gossip. It was a whisper of betrayal. Queen Camilla's voice was calm, measured, but unmistakably firm. She wasn't speaking to Charlotte. She was speaking about William, about his ability to lead, about the timing of succession, and most damning of all, about why she believed King Charles should remain on the throne, even if it cost him his health. In that moment, the crown wasn't just a symbol of duty. It became a weapon. Camilla's doubts, cloaked in concern, revealed something darker. A resistance to transition. A quiet but deliberate effort to hold on to power, no matter the price. Charlotte stood frozen, her heart pounding as the meaning of the words sank in. She didn't grasp every political implication, but she knew what doubt sounded like. She knew what it meant to prefer one person over another. And most of all, she knew that Camilla wasn't just voicing opinions, she was influencing fate. That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. The silence of the palace felt heavier than usual. At breakfast the next morning, she told her parents everything. William and Kate were stunned, not just by what Camilla had said, but by how precisely Charlotte remembered every word. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't dramatize. She recounted the phrases exactly as they had been spoken, each line sharp, clear, and cutting. William sat in silence, his face unreadable. Kate, ever composed, tried to hide the storm behind her eyes. But the damage was done. Camilla's words had crossed a line, not just politically, but personally. This wasn't about the monarchy anymore. This was about their family, and their daughter had heard more truth in one hallway than most courtiers would hear in a lifetime. The weight of the moment pulled them into unfamiliar territory. How much should they tell Charlotte? How could they protect her while still respecting the reality she had witnessed? William knew that shielding her from this truth would only leave her confused, but acknowledging it meant confirming her worst fears, that the crown she was born beneath wasn't always clean. It was a crown sometimes marred by quiet power plays and whispered judgments. And now, Charlotte was part of that reality. There were immediate implications. If Camilla's private doubts became public, or worse, if they influenced decisions behind closed doors, it could fracture the image of a stable succession. William had long prepared for the future, but now, that future was under silent siege, not from enemies abroad or the media's scrutiny, but from within. Charlotte had unknowingly stepped into a political firestorm, and the flames were only beginning to rise. What Charlotte revealed behind closed doors left emotional scars, but it wasn't the end of what she noticed. Influence isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers behind thrones. In the grand spectacle of monarchy, power doesn't always wear a crown. It often hides behind whispers, nods, and decisions made far from public view. While King Charles carried the weight of the crown and Prince William prepared to inherit its burden, Queen Camilla was busy crafting something more elusive: influence. Not the kind declared in headlines, but the kind that reshaped narratives subtly, redirected loyalty carefully, and positioned herself at the heart of a shifting royal order without ever seeming to move. Behind every carefully chosen photograph, every public appearance, every change in protocol, there was a trace of Camilla's calculated presence, a quiet strategist cloaked in royal etiquette. She never needed to raise her voice. She had mastered the art of appearing agreeable while subtly reshaping perception. Her influence on the family's image was unmistakable. Tradition, discretion, and composure were her weapons of choice. But while Camilla championed the values of predictability and preservation, William moved toward openness and change. He and Catherine had redefined the monarchy's future modern parenting, emotional intelligence, public vulnerability. And as their popularity soared, so did the unspoken tension with the old guard. Camilla didn't oppose William's vision publicly. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than words. Charlotte felt it too. Not in overt moments of conflict, but in the absence of warmth. There was always something missing. A void of connection that couldn't be explained away. By age or rank, Charlotte noticed the difference in how Camilla spoke to others versus how she addressed her and her brothers. There was a formality, a rehearsed tone that kept them at arm's length. No stories, no laughter, just courtesy. It wasn't enough to upset anyone, but it was enough for Charlotte to feel that love, in this case, had boundaries. Behind palace doors, the influence game unfolded slowly. At family events, Camilla steered the spotlight subtly toward Charles, or even her own grandchildren, while William and his children were often framed as supporting characters in a royal narrative they were born to lead. Seating arrangements at TDH, formal dinners, speaking roles during engagements, even who appeared in which frame during official portraits, small details to the public, major indicators to insiders. Charlotte picked up on them all. It was never direct, never provable, but always there, and the public had begun to notice. Body language analysts, royal commentators, and longtime watchers raised eyebrows at the shift in dynamics. Why was William increasingly framed as the heir apparent rather than the present force? Why did Camilla's presence sometimes eclipse Catherine's in moments that traditionally belonged to the future queen? And why did Charlotte, once known for her charming confidence, seem distant in Camilla's presence? Camilla had cultivated her power not through conflict, but through quiet control, controlling optics, tradition, and the tempo of royal life. But what she underestimated was the gaze of a child unburdened by history, yet wise beyond her years. Because Charlotte wasn't just witnessing the narrative, she was starting to question it. And questions, once formed in the mind of a royal with a voice and a conscience, have the power to disrupt even the most carefully preserved image. While Camilla quietly shaped her role, Charlotte's growing clarity was transforming her own. She may be small, but Charlotte is built for something far greater. Born into privilege, but raised with purpose, Princess Charlotte has never been just another royal child waving from a palace balcony. From the moment she stepped into the public eye, she carried herself with a poise that defied her age. The crowds saw a bright smile and a tidy dress. But what they missed was the unshakable confidence behind her eyes, the kind of presence that isn't taught. but inherited. Charlotte, shaped by a mother who redefined grace and a father who rebuilt his legacy from tragedy, is growing into something the monarchy hasn't seen in decades. A modern princess with the courage to feel, question, and lead. She's not the loudest in the room, but her emotional intelligence speaks volumes. Even as a young girl, she's shown a sensitivity far beyond her years, a quiet awareness of people's emotions, an intuitive sense of when something's off. This isn't coincidence. It's the result of an upbringing that rejected royal rigidity in favor of emotional honesty. William and Kate didn't raise their children to play roles, they raised them to understand the responsibility that comes with influence. And Charlotte absorbed those lessons deeply. She's the child who notices when someone's voice falters. What happens when a child of royalty sees what adults won't say aloud? Princess Charlotte may be young, but she's not blind to the tension in the palace. Her bold words, "I will show you the real Queen Camilla," sent shockwaves through the royal corridors. But what did she really mean? It wasn't a tantrum or a childish outburst. It was a chilling moment of clarity from a child raised in the shadows of two queens, one revered, the other tolerated. Behind her innocent gaze lies a mind far more observant than anyone expected. In a family where silence is protocol and diplomacy is survival. Charlotte's declaration broke centuries of unspoken rules. It came at a time when Queen Camilla had begun to solidify her place beside King Charles. The world had watched Camilla's steady ascent from controversy to quiet acceptance. But while the public learned to smile through the scandals, one little girl had been paying attention. And she wasn't smiling. Charlotte's bond with her parents, especially her father, Prince William, is deepened by the ever-present ghost of Princess Diana. Through stories and subtle lessons, Charlotte grew up understanding the difference between royal duty and human decency. And when she looked at Queen Camilla, something didn't sit right. Not just because of what she'd heard, but because of what she felt. Whispers in hallways, nervous glances, carefully chosen words when Camilla entered a room. Children may not know the full context, but they know when something's off. In the world's eyes, Queen Camilla is poised, dutiful, and composed. But behind palace walls, the picture isn't so pristine. Charlotte saw it, felt it. And when the moment came, she spoke, not out of malice, but out of instinct. What she overheard, what she revealed, threatens to crack the carefully curated image of the modern monarchy. But to understand Charlotte's courage, we need to explore how she began to question the crown from the inside. Diana's spirit never left the palace. Charlotte felt it before she understood it. Long before Charlotte knew who her grandmother truly was, she could feel her presence in whispers, in glances, in the weight of silence that filled the room when her name was mentioned. Diana wasn't just a woman in a portrait or a name in a bedtime story. She was the pulse behind her father's gentleness, the ache in his voice when he spoke of loss, the reason why love and empathy were never optional in their home. And for Charlotte, even in her earliest days, that emotional current was unmistakable. It shaped the way she viewed kindness, taught her that power without compassion was empty, and royalty without humanity was a crown made of glass. From the very beginning, Charlotte was wrapped in the warmth of stories that echoed Diana's courage and generosity. William never allowed the world to erase his mother's legacy. Instead, he carried it with quiet dignity and passed it on through soft words and fierce values. Charlotte learned that Diana was the kind of royal who held hands when others looked away, that she saw people not as subjects, but as souls. She began to measure sincerity not through titles, but through tone, and in doing so, something strange began to surface. Because while the stories about Diana glowed with affection, there was a noticeable shift in the room when Camilla's name came up. The atmosphere tightened. Conversations slowed. Smiles grew mechanical. Charlotte, too young to grasp the full truth, nonetheless sensed the tension. Her instincts told her something wasn't right. Adults became careful with their words, choosing politeness over truth. But Charlotte, ever observant, noticed what they didn't say, and more importantly, how they said it. The respect they showed to Camilla always felt laced with obligation, never the effortless affection that Diana's memory inspired. Camilla's presence in the family felt different to Charlotte. Distant, reserved, sometimes even cold. Unlike Diana, whose warmth lived on in the way William comforted his children, or the way Kate embraced strangers at events, Camilla's demeanor seemed studied, even performative. It was in the slight pauses before her name was uttered, the forced pleasantries, the eyes that dropped rather than met, and while no one dared explain it to her, Charlotte knew that this wasn't the kind of love her father grew up with, or the kind of queen he envisioned standing beside him. As Charlotte grew, so did her perception. The gap between the grandmother she never met and the queen she watched from afar became impossible to ignore. Diana had become her compass, an invisible but powerful force guiding her understanding of what a royal should be, not in appearance, but in heart. And it was that heart, full of inherited empathy, that began to sense a quiet dissonance in the family, a contrast that stirred questions no one dared ask. And while Diana's legacy shaped her heart, it was Queen Camilla's behavior that stirred her doubts. Behind palace walls, smiles hide the fractures, and children feel what adults ignore. Camilla had the title, the crown, the carefully rehearsed gestures. But when it came to the youngest members of the royal family, something crucial was missing: genuine connection. Charlotte, George, and Louis weren't just heirs in training. They were keen observers, born into a palace steeped in formality, but raised by parents determined to break that mold. In their eyes, affection was never a performance. It was felt in the warmth of a hug, the softness of a voice, the instinctive reach for a hand. Yet, when Camilla stepped into the room, the atmosphere shifted. Politeness took over, but the warmth was never mutual. The children did what they were taught: respect the queen, but respect does not equal closeness. And Charlotte, with her sharp intuition, saw through the polished exterior. The difference became starker when the children spent time with their maternal grandparents, Carol and Michael Middleton. There, they were not royal figures, they were simply loved. The hugs were unprompted, the laughs real, the conversations unfiltered. Charlotte felt seen. At the Middletons' home, there were no protocols, no calculated pauses in conversation. It was in these everyday moments that Charlotte learned what emotional safety truly meant. And with that contrast burned into her young mind, she couldn't help but notice the distance Camilla maintained, not just physically, but emotionally. Public appearances only amplified what was already felt in private. During royal engagements like Trooping the Color, the cameras might have captured smiles, but they missed what Charlotte saw: Camilla doting on her biological grandchildren with a familiarity she never extended to the Wales children. There were moments, small but telling, when Charlotte would glance at Camilla and see her focused elsewhere, embracing the children of her first marriage as if they were her only true lineage. For a child learning to define loyalty and love, that selective affection stung in ways she couldn't yet articulate. William and Kate had worked tirelessly to shield their children from the cold formality that often defined royal upbringing. They created a home where emotions weren't buried beneath duty. Laughter echoed in the halls. Bedtime stories replaced stiff goodnights. Mistakes were met with understanding, not judgment. It was this very upbringing, one rooted in openness, kindness, and vulnerability, that helped Charlotte sense the emotional void around Camilla. She wasn't taught to fear hierarchy. She was taught to value sincerity. And when sincerity was missing, she felt it in her bones. Charlotte was growing up in a palace divided not just by bloodlines, but by emotional realities. Camilla had carved out a role for herself within the institution. But when it came to the next generation, her crown held little weight. Because love can't be commanded, and children know the difference. Charlotte didn't need whispered warnings or family secrets to understand that Camilla existed on the fringes of their world. All she needed were the small, quiet moments that revealed everything adults tried to hide. It was during one royal event that Charlotte's quiet concerns began to grow into something more serious. Not all royal ceremonies end with applause. Some end with silence. The Christmas service at Westminster Abbey was supposed to be a moment of unity, a celebration of tradition wrapped in warmth and reverence. The cameras were focused on the grandeur, the music, the carefully choreographed smiles. But beneath the polished surface, something subtle and far more revealing was unfolding. A single glance, a momentary pause, a strange silence that clung to the air like frost. Queen Camilla, ever composed, stood among the royals like a piece of regal furniture present, but oddly detached. The public saw a gathering of family. Charlotte saw the cold. As the family made their way into the abbey, Camilla kept a courteous distance, not from the cameras, but from the children. While King Charles greeted his grandchildren with affection, Camilla seemed to linger on the edge, offering only measured nods and tight smiles. To most, it passed unnoticed, but not to Charlotte. She stood close to her mother, her little fingers curling tightly around Kate's hand. Her eyes, wide and curious, tracked the movement. Camilla, surrounded by formality, offered nothing resembling the warmth she gave her own grandchildren. The message was silent, but it echoed loudly to a child, raised on truth. There was a brief moment when their eyes met. Charlotte's expression faltered, shifting from polite interest to something more restrained. A discomfort too nuanced for the press to capture, but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Kate noticed it too. She didn't speak, didn't flinch. Instead, she gently moved Charlotte closer to her side. A protective motion, a signal. The sibling who steps in when Louis gets overwhelmed. The granddaughter who asks questions about a grandmother she never met because she can still feel the love she left behind. During the height of the pandemic, when fear clouded the nation, Charlotte wasn't shielded from the crisis, she stepped into it. Alongside her family, she delivered meals to vulnerable residents near Anmer Hall. She wasn't performing for cameras, she was serving with compassion. And it wasn't lost on the public. They saw more than a child participating in charity, they saw the early emergence of a leader. That moment, quiet and unscripted, reminded many of Diana. Not because of lineage, but because of heart. The resemblance between Charlotte and her grandmother is not simply physical. It's emotional. Like Diana, Charlotte leads with empathy. She connects before she commands. And that connection doesn't just extend to strangers, it defines her bond with her brothers. She's fiercely protective of Louis, steady around George. She doesn't seek attention, but when she speaks, it matters. Whether correcting a protocol slip or holding firm during a public appearance, Charlotte stands tall, not with arrogance, but with self-respect. And people notice. The world has watched her grow, not just in age, but in spirit. Every public appearance strengthens her reputation as the royal family's most emotionally in-tune next-generation figure. Social media floods with admiration after every engagement she attends. Her composure at memorials, her wit during photo ops, her strength when the eyes of the world are upon her. Charlotte is more than a future royal, she is a bridge. Between tradition and progress. Between duty and authenticity. And it's becoming clearer with every passing year. She wasn't born to be silent. But if Charlotte stands for change, what does Camilla really represent beneath the crown? To the world, she is calm and composed. But is that all she is? Camilla, Queen Consort of the United Kingdom, has often been painted as the quiet force beside King Charles. A woman who rose through scandal and controversy only to emerge as a symbol of consistency and calm. She speaks softly. She steps carefully. And for much of the public, she appears to be a steady, benevolent figure, a patron of causes that matter. A queen without drama, a royal who finally found her place. Her work spans education, literacy, cancer awareness, and domestic abuse. And no one can deny her devotion to these causes. She listens when others speak. She stands where duty calls. She does not chase attention. But behind that carefully composed image lies a question few dare to ask. Is it authenticity or is it survival? Her approach to leadership is subtle, almost invisible. She doesn't dominate rooms, she glides through them. At charity events, she engages with elegance. At public ceremonies, she appears reserved but respectful. There's an aura of practiced humility about her. But to those within palace walls, this quietness feels calculated. Her kindness is often described as professional, never unkind, but never deeply warm. It's a type of royalty that leans on protocol rather than presence. And to a generation raised on emotional transparency, Camilla's restraint can feel like a wall rather than a window. Critics whisper that her softness in public does not always reflect her private demeanor. Staff have noted her guardedness, her tendency to stay at the edge of personal interaction. Even family members have kept their praise measured. The transformation from mistress to queen may have been accepted by the institution, but acceptance is not the same as affection. Public sympathy grew over time. Many admired her resilience, her ability to weather decades of criticism without lashing back. But admiration doesn't equal trust. For many, she remains the outsider who adapted, not the insider who belonged. Edie's journey into the heart of the monarchy was not one of immediate welcome. She entered in her 50s, after years of scandal that fractured the image of the royal family. Her path was littered with disapproval, skepticism, and grief. She didn't try to erase Diana's memory. She simply outlasted it. Through silence, through endurance, through an unwavering commitment to not give the public any more reasons to turn on her. And in doing so, she became something of a paradox, both the most controversial and the most careful figure at the royal table. Over time, the headlines softened, the jeers quieted. Camilla's loyalty to Charles earned her a new title and a new narrative. But not everyone bought into the reinvention, because while her public efforts were noble, the contrast between her controlled compassion and her perceived detachment within the family didn't go unnoticed, especially by the youngest royal watchers, like Charlotte, who sensed the difference between true warmth and well-timed charity. In the end, Camilla's reign is defined not by scandal or triumph, but by complexity. She exists in the space between duty and distance, devotion and doubt, a woman who has done much good, yet remains shadowed by what once was, and by what some believe still lingers behind her smile. And in this palace, where two royal women live, one future remains uncertain. One wears the crown, the other holds the abbey's future. In the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace, where portraits whisper the weight of centuries and rituals rule like iron beneath velvet, two very different queens now walk the same path, yet never truly side by side. One is Camilla, Queen Consorts, by title, not by legacy. Her journey to the throne was paved not with applause, but with resistance, misunderstandings, and the relentless shadow of another woman's light. She didn't charm her way into the monarchy, she endured it. And for decades, she remained patient, while the world waited for her to fall. But Camilla never crumbled. She learned to navigate the silence, to survive the judgment, to steady herself through scandal. Her crown wasn't inherited. It was earned painfully, quietly, and without the affection that once crowned Diana in the hearts of millions. And then there is Charlotte. She doesn't wear a crown, not yet, but she carries something far heavier, expectation. Not from the institution, but from the people. Charlotte was born into a different era, one where cameras are constant, but so is scrutiny. One where a princess isn't just a figurehead, but a symbol. She doesn't need to rewrite the rules. She already lives by a new code. Her power doesn't come from marriage, endurance, or survival. It comes from truth, from how she sees the world, and dares to speak about what doesn't feel right. Her instincts aren't polished by advisors. They're sharpened by empathy, by experience, by a legacy built not on crowns, but compassion. This is the clash unfolding behind palace walls. Not a feud of personalities, but of generations. Camilla represents the monarchy as it was guarded, composed, emotionally distant. Charlotte embodies what it might become: open, empathetic, and unafraid to confront uncomfortable truths. Camilla believes in preserving dignity through silence. Charlotte believes in preserving honor through honesty. The former has mastered discretion. The latter has begun questioning why discretion was ever mistaken for virtue. It's not that Charlotte wants to challenge Camilla's place. It's that her presence alone does. The contrast is too stark, too undeniable. Camilla, who once tiptoed into royal life, now feels the ground shifting beneath her feet. Because in every public appearance Charlotte makes, in every spontaneous act of kindness or sharp glance of wisdom, the world sees something else. The possibility of a different kind of queen, one who doesn't wait for history to forgive her, but who writes it with every move. Camilla has tried to stay relevant. to soften her image through charity, humility, and consistency. But the more Charlotte grows, the more that effort seems like a race against time. Because no amount of soft-spoken resilience can compete with the raw authenticity of a child who's never known a world where silence is safety. Camilla may have spent decades trying to earn her place in the public's heart. But Charlotte, without trying, has already taken root. And so the question looms, as the crown passes through generations, will Camilla be remembered for surviving tradition or resisting change? And when the time comes, will her legacy be one of quiet stability or quiet disconnection? Because sometimes it takes a child to ask the question no adult dares say out loud. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.